Welcome to Thieves Cant, a tabletop gaming podcast with your hosts, Jeremy Shane and Chris White.
Welcome in, welcome back. It is Thieves Cant for Thursday, February 26th. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm Chris White.
Glad to have you. Thanks so much for listening and subscribing at thievescantcast. You can email us, thievescantcast@gmail.com. We love a good email.
We love it.
Chris,
so much.
How you doing today?
Doing good, feeling strong.
Strong man.
Strong like a bull.
Hey, today, some back booth banter. Our discussion is going to focus on random encounters. But before we dive in, let's take a step back because this is an extension of last Thursday's chat about dungeon turns, right?
Yes.
You kind of made it a point in that conversation that, random encounters are part of the dungeon turn. It's something that can happen, right?
Yeah. I think this is a really important component. In fact, I think this is a necessary component to that idea, just going along with the idea of dungeon turns and everything that brought with it, right? Everything we talked about.
Right.
I think this is a critical part of that.
Before we get into when to use random encounters and why you would want to use them, can we talk about some of the pushback against random encounters? Because, I think there are certainly folks who are not fans.
I would have considered myself part of that group. Yeah. Years ago, yeah.
Right, because it's the mindset that, no, I know when the encounter should happen, or I've got a feel for it.
Right.
If they go to this location, that's a trigger, this will happen. Or maybe I've got this encounter planned, and I'm going to drop it in wherever they go.
Right.
At the appropriate moment.
Yeah.
So rolling for an encounter really pushes back against that idea.
It does. Because basically you're trying to make every encounter a set piece. And so the idea of random encounters, first of all, you're sort of giving up some control, I guess, there, as far as everything that happens. At least that's how I regarded it. Right. And it was sort of why would I want this? I almost viewed it as like a crutch. And now I recognize it's not. This is a game. And this is a very important part of that game.
When do you roll for a random encounter? You mentioned the 10-minute increment for a dungeon turn. Are you rolling once every dungeon turn?
You can. And so that's where I started looking at Shadow Dark, for example. They have very clear rules. How do you regard this dungeon? Is it unsafe? Then check every 3 rounds. Is it risky? Every 2. Is it deadly? Every 1.
That makes sense.
Right? And so you sort of have a knob now where you can adjust the difficulty of this dungeon based on that.
So it's circumstantial.
Right. I would say a good base is around every 3 rounds, but your mileage may vary. The more you play with this, the more you're going to hone in on what you and your party need here. But, so say you do every 3 rounds. Well, then we have to consider at what's going to trigger, right? Are we going to roll a D6 and, a 1 triggers an encounter? Okay, we can do that. Well, maybe there's other factors impacting this. Let's say that the parties, they couldn't pick the lock on the door, so they decided they were going to kick it in. Okay, well,
make some noise.
We made some noise. So maybe I'm going to make it a 1 or a 2. So think about it. Everything requires rounds. I was really thinking about this. I was like, how do these things, I know they apply to, if you have an old school game that you're running, but what about a modern game? Well, every decision that you make, this is why the random encounter is so important, because every decision you make has consequences. Even in a modern game like 5e, how long is a short rest? 1 hour, right? So that's 6 dungeon turns. So that's going to be 2 random encounter rolls. There's a strong possibility we may have an encounter because of this, right? How quickly we're moving through the dungeon. Because what we don't want is people just, and I know you've been there, where we're just going to meticulously study every square inch of this dungeon to try to find anything that's there. Except the thing is, the clock's ticking. And so, when you waste enough time, eventually there's going to be an encounter. And that encounter is going to drain those resources that are so precious, right? Primarily in this case, hit points, which we really should think of as resource.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of gets into the why should you use them, because it ideally is connected to every aspect of the game that you're engaging with.
It is.
Right?
And it even goes beyond that because it just makes everything uncomfortable. It makes the dungeon a kind of wild and unpredictable place. And you need to think about when you're populating these random encounters, they're not completely random, are they? Because you're probably you're gonna know what these encounters are gonna be beforehand. Well, make it things that make sense, right? I mean, if you're in the Goblin's Lair, I know you love goblins. That's your favorite low-level adventure.
You can't get away from them.
Yeah. So you're in the Goblin's Lair. One option obviously could be a band of goblins, right? Just a patrol wandering around. Or it could be a troll because, okay, well, why would this random troll be here? Well, maybe he's rejected by the goblins, right? Maybe they can't get rid of him, but they're certainly not going to welcome him in. So he's just wandering around. Maybe it's an ooze. Maybe it's,
And maybe it's not a creature at all. On your list of random encounters, you might have traps. You might have environmental hazards.
You could, yes.
Right? If we are, let's remove ourselves from the dungeon, right? Mm-hmm. If we are adventuring in a swamp, my random encounter table or deck, if I've made cards, might include creatures of the swamp, but also quicksand or poisonous gas or something like that.
Yeah,
so
it
doesn't strictly have to be monster based encounters.
No, you're right. This is a tool that you can use for a lot of different things.
And really everything that we're discussing here about, making monsters and hazards specific to the location. Really, I think that's a great tip if you're going to utilize random encounters. Make sure that you are not just picking a random page from your monster manual. Create custom tables or decks in advance and have those on standby for each particular locale.
Well, you don't want the swamp troll in the Arctic setting or whatever the equivalent may be.
Yeah, you've got to maintain some level of internal logic here.
Yes, right.
I think another tip, and we can kind of get into tips here for random encounters. I think simple stat blocks are your friend, because whenever something comes up unexpectedly, I don't want to be jarred as a DM, which is oftentimes why we avoid this type of thing to begin with, right? Because we want to be and feel prepared, right? We want to be ready for anything. Well, if you're utilizing simple stat blocks, you can be. Remember, any stat block can serve your needs if you just reflavor it. Have that bear stat block ready to go and turn it into that undead creature. Turn it into the ogre. Whatever. Just something simple that you can work with on the fly. Yeah. And your players are not going to know. Right. Exactly. As long as you're flavoring it the way it needs to feel, they are not going to know that you're using the bear stat block. And finally, with random encounters, I think a key point here is you got to make them matter. Like, it may be random, but that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to make this part of the larger story. Now, on the flip side, I don't think a random encounter should cause you to stress as a DM to shoehorn it. But if you see an opportunity, if you notice connections being made, one character is particularly interested in what's happening, well, make it matter for their character, right? Yeah. If you never know when you introduce these elements how players are going to react to it. It may be sometimes players latch onto the strangest things and really lean into it, and that becomes such a memorable part. So, but again, some of these elements can come back also. One thing I'd like to talk about, not necessarily today, but I would like to lean into more into morale and the reactions of these encounters, because I think that's a big part of this. Because there's going to come a point where, okay, maybe you're fighting whatever creature. Maybe you do encounter that goblin band, and things go poorly for them. Well, maybe they take off running. Right.
And you have to decide, do we really want to chase these things further in or
into the unknown?
Right. Or do we want to let them go? Well, if we let them go, are we going to see them again?
Yeah, probably.
So there's all sorts of fun developments that can come out of this.
Yeah. The final point that I really wanted to explore here as we chat about random encounters is a point that you've made with dungeon turns, random encounters. Chris, you've stated numerous times that these are elements of the game that in its roots were the game.
Right.
Right. And as time has gone on and decades have passed, we have lost some of that.
Right.
So it's interesting to me, the wildly different feel between games that design around the idea of random encounters versus those that do not, but maybe give you a handful of tools, a brief write-up in your DMG, for example.
Right.
Looking at a game like Forbidden Lands. All right. The travel mechanics in Forbidden Lands, they divide each day into 4 quarter days. So you've got your morning, your afternoon, evening, and night. And during each of those, players take on roles. Right? Everybody in the party takes on a role, kind of like in a dungeon turn. Right. So somebody can lead the way, and they can make survival rolls for navigation. Somebody can keep watch, and so they're scouting for threats. Somebody can forage or hunt or make camp. The random encounters then come in whenever failed rolls to do those things trigger a mishap.
Yeah.
And so now we're rolling on the mishap table to find out what that random encounter might look like. So this is more of a player-facing mechanic.
Right.
I failed at my task, and so we're going to find out what happens as a result of that, rather than the GM saying, all right, every 3 dungeon turns, I'm going to see if there is a random encounter. Or, you made a little noise kicking in the door when you decided to, so maybe there's an encounter here.
Yeah.
So this is simply the result of player action gone wrong. So in the player's handbook for Forbidden Lands, for any of those specific quarter day tasks, they each have their own mishap table. So for Lead the Way, for example, if I've got a roll on the mishap table, maybe we encounter quicksand, or we get lost. Somebody sprains an ankle. There's a landslide. We encounter fog or a wasp's nest, right? And each of those has more description to go along with it. And that's just leading the way.
Yep.
Keeping watch has its own table. Making camp has its own table.
Yeah.
And then the Game Master's Guide expands this out even further. It's got terrain-specific mishap tables. So are we on the plains? Are we in the forest? Dark forest or hills? Are we in the mountains? Are we lakeside? Yep. Each of those has their own set of tables. And these are super story specific as well.
Yeah.
For example, maybe we encounter the sleepy troll. Maybe you encounter the lizard hunters. And then for each of these, there's like some flavor text that you can share with the party as well. So that's how Forbidden Lands goes about it. There's some guidance here as well. What if you roll the same result?
Yeah.
Well, as you suggested, maybe it's the same group that you encountered before.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a different group, or you could just re-roll it if it doesn't jive.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I mean, it's kind of accomplishing the same goal, right? Yeah. I mean, this one, maybe the players have, it's a little different in that, they're managing a different resource. They're rolling those skills they have.
Right.
But that's particularly for overland travel. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And it, gosh, doesn't that seem more interesting?
Oh, yeah.
Than the way that a lot of modern games portray overland travel?
It all points back to emergent gameplay and emergent story.
Yeah.
All right. We have a general idea. Like the characters probably have a goal in mind. But, at that point, we're talking about, points on the line. And the interesting stuff often is in the spaces in between.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just makes it just makes you more involved. It makes every decision count a lot more. There's a YouTube channel that I follow pretty frequently, Tinker's Tavern, I think I mentioned before. But one thing that he said, and this really struck a chord with me, was that it particularly going back to like a dungeon, without Wandering Monsters, a dungeon is basically just a museum. You're just basically going from one set piece to another, you know, and there, it's not really alive. So this brings a sense of danger, that continual sense of impending doom.
High stakes.
Yeah, it's just like, we don't want to linger here. This is not a place where we want to, because the longer we're here, the worse it gets. And so that kind of conveys that idea. And like you said, I mean, these are things that can stretch and ideas that can be expanded in a lot of different ways. But I think we really need to think about bringing back the random encounters and the wandering monsters. I think there's a reason why a lot of gamers have started to revisit these ideas, because I think there's some really good ideas there.
You're telling me it's not just random?
It's not just random.
Random encounters. You have thoughts? We want to hear them. You can share. thievescantcast@gmail.com. Drop a note in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Hey, coming up tomorrow, we will wrap up the week with a round of Chris Makes the Call.
Oh, is that it?
We're going to put you on the spot tomorrow. Some conundrums, some in-game scenarios in which there might not be an easy answer, but you've got to squirm and come up with one. Sound good?
I am up to the challenge.
As always. All right, so that's on tap for Friday. Until then, it's been Thieves Cant. Thanks for listening. I'm Jeremy Shane.
And I'm still Chris White.
So long.
Thank you for listening to Thieves Cant. Email thievescantcast@gmail.com.